Hello, everybody. Welcome to the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities Loan Repayment Program Technical Assistance Webinar. I'm joined today by my colleagues from NIMHD, Dr. Marilyn Lodge-Sharp and Ms. Lihia Artiles, and from the Division of Loan Repayment by Dr. Erica Boone, Andrew Chosick, and Matthew Lockhart. In this presentation today, we're going to cover a number of things: a brief history of the loan repayment program, eligibility requirements both from the program and the financial end, career advancements of LRP recipients, the review process, the LRP timeline, contingency plans, and we'll have a time for questions and answers. During the course of the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat box, and Lihia will we'll take them down, and at the end, when we turn to questions and answers, we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. Thank you. Just very briefly, the loan repayment program was established in 1988 to provide support for individuals to stay in research rather than going to industry. And the first program was an intramural program supporting AIDS researchers, followed in 1993 by intramural and extramural programs supporting researchers working in contraception and fertility, general clinical research, and clinical research for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. 2000 brought in further expansion of the number of programs intramurally and extramurally to 6, including health disparities research. The 21st Century Cures Act really it ushered in an improvement of the loan repayment programs, and it gave the NIH director the authority to establish or eliminate LRP categories to address scientific and workforce needs. There has been an expansion of participation in the health disparities loan repayment program so that now all NIH ICs, that is institutes and centers, participate in funding applications to the health disparities loan repayment program. In terms of coming attractions, there has been established a REACH program, Research in Emerging Areas Critical to Human Health, and that will be implemented in 2021. These are the 6 LRP subcategories that are operating now. Clinical research, which is patient-oriented research conducted with human subjects or materials of human origin on the causes and consequences of disease. Pediatric research that allows researchers to focus on diseases related to disorders or diseases in children. Health disparities research, which focuses on minority health and health disparities. We'll talk about that a lot more later. All ICs are now receiving applications for this. Contraception and fertility research, clinical research for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. We'll also talk about that more later. And then the upcoming REACH program. The NIMHD is the institute at the NIH which envisions an America in which all populations will have an equal opportunity to live a long and healthy and productive life or lives. And we lead scientific research to improve minority health and eliminate health disparities throughout the NIH. So it's important when you're considering your application to the NIMHD to health disparities research, that your research either focus on minority health or the health of minorities or disparities and the causes of those health disparities, what we can do to reduce or eliminate health disparities in these populations. The populations are defined as racial ethnic minorities, rural underserved populations, low socioeconomic status, and sexual gender minority groups. We support research to understand the causes of and to reduce health disparities, and we do this through a diverse set of training activities as well as other workforce development activities. One of them is the Health Disparities Research Institute, which I strongly encourage you to look into and to apply for. We also support summer internships at the NIH, diversity supplements, center grants, and clinical research and educational development programs. We also participate in many trans NIH efforts. The list is long, and there's a hot link to it embedded in this slide. We're going to talk now about the eligibility of the proposed research. Remember that These programs are contract programs. They are not grants. And the purpose of the program is to retain and recruit qualified health professionals as research investigators to careers in research, but specifically in NIH-funded research. For the L60, again, that's to support minority health and health disparities research, and for the clinical research for disadvantaged backgrounds, we target specifically those who have had more difficulty economically in completing their terminal degrees. So what is the definition of clinical research from the NIH perspective? At the heart of that is human contact. And that's a key criteria for responsiveness to this application mechanism. If your research is patient-oriented, that's what we're looking for. If you have only animal model research, that research is not qualified for this particular mechanism, and you should look into the other Division of Loan Repayment mechanisms. We look at the causes and consequences of disease, regardless of where they are and what they are, and this mechanism requires that there's direct involvement with material of human origin that is collected directly by the PI or a close colleague, and this could be tissue material or cognitive material or whatever, but it has to be directly connected. The research setting does not matter for this application. This is the one place where research in international context can take place as long as the work is clinical. And the determination for eligibility is based on the applicant and/or the family's economic status. This determination is done through the Division of Loan Repayment. For the L60, minority health or health disparities is the focus, and the individual must demonstrate a commitment to health disparities research in all areas of the application. That means from the personal statement and the bio sketch through the research plan, through the contact with mentors, and the mentors need to attest to the strength of the commitment of the individual, both currently and in the past, to research in minority health or health disparities. Your current research must be explicitly focused on health disparities and paid for through funding outside of this loan repayment application. It must highlight previous health disparities research that you've done for a competitive application, and it must clearly delineate your next steps for future research linked with your career development next steps. You need to tell your story in a way that shows that you are building on what your mentor has done and that you're coming out from under your mentor's umbrella, and showcase or really shed light on how you will be developing into an independent investigator yourself. These are the definitions for health disparities research and minority health disparities research, minority research. Please look at them carefully. They are legally determined. We cannot change them. And there are other populations that you may think would qualify for this. One population is the disabled population. That is not part of the legal definition at this time. That may change in the future, but it is not at this time. So please be aware that this is a responsiveness criteria that you must adhere to for this. Another thing that you need to know is that health disparities research, regardless of where it's being funded, regardless of the IC that you apply to, must be conducted in the United States, or if it is being conducted abroad, it must have direct relevance to health disparities in the United States to be responsive. The NIMHD has developed a research framework that may be helpful to you in thinking of your research and how to make it more competitive. We consider levels of influence and domains of influence in terms of the variables that have an impact on health and the intersection of those influences. And we like to see research that's both multi-level and has an impact on multiple domains or considers multiple domains of influence over the life course when we're looking at what the health outcomes are. So not only do you need to make a case that there's a disparity in the health outcome, that you're looking at, but you need to look at the complexity of the lived experience and what that influence is on that particular health outcome. So, do you apply to NIMHD or to another institute? If your work focuses on health disparities resulting from being a member of a racial or ethnic minority, a rural or underserved population, or a sexual gender minority, and addressing the underlying processes that produce those disparities, then NIMHD is the place to apply. We are disease agnostic. That means that we focus on any disease outcome where there is a documented health disparity. We focus on work that looks at disease processes, the life cycle stage, the body system, in minority populations or other populations that specific, if your work focuses on the disease processes, a specific life stage, or the body system in minority populations or other populations that experience health disparities, you may go to another institute for funding. The decision is yours and how you target your application. You're focused on health disparities and the underlying causes of health disparities, it comes to us. If you're focused on a specific disease process or life cycle stage, whatever, it goes to the other IC. Here are some examples that might help you to understand this better and that addresses some issues that you might have. I submitted a mentored researcher application last year, which was not funded, but I'd like to submit again this November. My research focuses on health disparities related to African American youth engagement in substance use. In addition, as a developmental psychologist, I take a lifespan approach by considering the transmission of underlying processes of coping from parents to youth. Coping with discrimination experiences is the primary focus. This applicant should consider not just NIMHD, but they should also look at how this would fit at NIDA, the institute that focuses on drug abuse, NIAAA, that focuses on alcohol and alcoholism, Child Health and Human Development, that focuses specifically on youth and the adolescent developmental period. So there are 4 institutes that might be interested in this particular research project. The focus on health disparities and elimination of a health disparity would make it come to NIMHD. So 4 or 5 institutes rather. That decision is yours, but you should look at and talk with program officers from other ICs as well. A second example, my research examines the impact of nursing resources on maternal outcomes and the racial disparities in those outcomes. Research indicates that one explanation for racial disparities in maternal outcomes is varying quality of care in minority versus white serving hospitals. Differences in nursing resources across those hospitals may be one of the underlying factors explaining the disparities in outcomes and also offers a target amenable to intervention. This could very clearly come to NIMHD, but it also could go to nursing research. It could also go to Child Health and Human Development, which focuses on maternal health outcomes. The next example, my research focuses on identifying psychosocial factors, specifically perceived stress, social support influences the relationship between poor health status, that is high blood pressure, hypertension, and cognition, and how stress and coping impact blood pressure and cognition among aging African American and Latino populations. Again, if you're looking at the health disparity among African American and Latino populations in high blood pressure and the related cognitive impact or how stress and coping have an impact on high blood pressure, then you would maybe come to NIMHD. If you're more focused on the mechanisms and the relationship between stress and hypertension, you may want to go rather to NHLBI. Or if you're focused more on cognition and cognitive functioning and how that operates in these populations, you may want to go to NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health. Or if you're looking more at the neurological substrates, you might even want to consider National Institute on Neurological Disorders and Strokes. My research focuses on anxiety and misdiagnosed hypertension in the clinic and racial ethnic disparities. In this case, Again, this could go to NIMH, it could go to NINDS, but it also could come here if the focus is on the disparities in anxiety and hypertension diagnosis. And my recommendation would be to keep your research focused and make sure that there's a logical connection between the health outcomes that you're measuring. My research focuses on health inequities, specifically substance use among Native American college students and substance use HIV prevention. We'll utilize 2 programs targeting these populations to target collegiate alcohol and other drug use through a brief cognitive behavioral motivational individual intervention. This also looks like it's firmly directed at NIMHD, but the applicant should also consider NIDA, NIAAA, NIAID, and NIMH, and maybe NINDS as well in terms of targeting their research. And when you submit, the applications first go to the Center for Scientific Review for triage, and they will send you to the institute that looks like it's the best fit for your application, according to predetermined receipt and referral guidelines. We're now going to turn to eligibility, and I'm going to turn this over to my Division of Loan Repayment colleagues.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the NIMHD Technical Assistance webinar. My name is Andrew Chuzek, and I am with the Division of Loan Repayment. And at this time, I'd like to give prospective applicants an idea of the basic eligibility criteria that we use to ensure that your application can move forward on to review. Firstly, all of our applicants must possess a doctoral degree or an equivalent. It is an exception that for contraception and infertility research, you do not need a doctoral degree, but that doesn't exactly apply here, as NIMHD does not review CIR applications. So if you are applying to NIMHD, it is a requirement that you have a doctoral degree or its equivalent. All of our applicants must be U.S. citizens. If you are not currently a U.S. citizen, but you anticipate becoming one prior to July 1st, when our contract dates are actually ratified, at that time you would be a U.S. citizen, so it is permissible for you to apply for your LRP award in this application cycle. Additionally, you must have a protected amount of research time, and that protected research time must be at least 20 hours per week. So in your specific research that you're proposing to be eligible for the LRP program, you must be dedicating at least 20 hours per week towards that research. Additionally, you have to have educational loan debt. This sort of makes sense considering we are a loan repayment program. So in other words, you must have at least 20% of your annual base salary in educational debt. So to kind of put that into perspective, just to use some numbers and make things a little bit clear, if your annual base salary were to be $100,000 per year, you would have to have a minimum of $20,000 in educational debt. I should also mention that educational debt is something that we look at very closely. All of your educational debt must originate from a U.S. bank. We do not pay on any foreign loans. So all of that educational debt must originate with a U.S. bank. And lastly, you must have research support funding that is coming from a domestic, nonprofit, university, or government organization. Your research support funding, and I really want to stress this particular point, cannot originate from any for-profit sources. And that includes in particular and in specific, any type of funding that's coming from a pharma. So if you are involved in anything such as a clinical trial study, or if your particular research in some way is benefiting from for-profit dollars, you are likely to be ineligible for the LRP. For additional information on that particular and specific point, we encourage you to reach the LRP Information Center, and that information will be given towards the end of this, towards the end of the webinar. So that is an absolute showstopper with respect to your application. In the present, you do not necessarily need to have a grant from the NIH in order to apply, but you do need to have some kind of funding that is coming from a domestic nonprofit, and that can include grants that originate from other types of organizations, or it can also include startup that you're receiving directly from your employer, or it can include salary support. So that is the essence of our eligibility criteria. And again, if you have any specific questions about that, we encourage you to reach the LRP Information Center. Regarding qualified loans, the NIH will repay, and this is something that we alluded to moments ago, the NIH will repay educational loans from any of your undergraduate degrees all the way up to your terminal degrees. Those loans must be backed by the U.S. government, and the educational loans must come from an accredited U.S. academic institution and commercial lenders. So in other words, the loans that you borrowed need to have gone to a U.S. accredited institution, and those loans must have originated from a U.S. banking institution. The NIH will not repay any non-educational loans. So in other words, sorry to report, we're not going to pay off your credit card debt. Plus loans are not going to be repaid. There is one minor exception, but at this stage, those individuals who can get those exceptions for the plus loans are very few and far between. Loans, again, coming from any non-U.S. governments or institutions are verboten. Loans that have been converted to a service obligation that are delinquent or in default are not going to be repaid. Loans consolidated with another individual. So if you and your spouse, for example, have consolidated your educational debt, those loans will not be permitted to be put into your portfolio. And loans of full-time federal government or VA fellows are also excluded and would not make it into your final loan portfolio. NIH LRP applications and awards. This gives you a nice portrait and kind of an idea of understanding what the success rates are relative to the number of applications that are submitted and those applications that go on to receive an award. And you can see in each of the last several fiscal years between fiscal year 16 and 19, and the heading at the top will tell you where we are relative to health disparities, which you can see in red in the bar. And our overall success rate for the applications to awards is roughly 50%. And that breaks down, roughly speaking, about 40% success rate for new applications and roughly 60% success rate for renewal applications. And I just wanted to make specific mention with respect to our applications and awards. If you notice in fiscal year 19, the Health Disparities Program received 392 applications, of which 83 received an award. So that is roughly a 20% success rate. So while overall success rates are in the 50% range, as mentioned, about 40% for new, 60% for renewal, specifically for health disparities, that success rate is closer to 20%. We can preliminarily tell you, since the Health Disparities Program has been opened up and is now reviewed by ICs other than NIMHD, that the success rate has actually improved slightly, and we're now looking at about a 25 or 26% success rate versus a 20% success rate, which we saw in fiscal year 19. I would encourage anybody who is interested in looking at any of this historical data, prospective applicants, current applicants, etc., to please visit www.lrp.nih.gov and find our data and reports page on our website. And you'll be able to see all of the historical data going back to, I believe, fiscal year 16, if not back a little bit, almost to 14, and you'll be able to look at various different success rates for all the programs, including health disparities, as well as clinical DB, or the Clinical Disadvantaged Backgrounds program, which is also a smaller program run by NIMHD. And here, let's give you a snapshot of the extramural LRP applications from this past fiscal year of 2019. Our fiscal year 20 data should be available shortly, and you'll be able to see that information on our dashboard. That information has not yet been put out into the public sphere yet. So again, just looking at the fiscal year 19 information, the average age of our applicants was roughly 37, and the average award dollar was $56,000. I also wanted to mention, though, that in this past year, fiscal year 2020, that the cap for the application awards was increased from 70,000 to 100,000. So the fiscal year 19 data is just a little bit skewed downwards, whereas our expectation is that when we release the fiscal year 20 information, the average award dollar will skew slightly higher. In terms of average debt, you can see a breakdown of the individuals who have debt profiles of less than 50,000, all the way to individuals who have debt profiles of over $200,000. So we really do run the gamut with respect to different debt profiles. Individuals who have everything from small amounts of debt that they're still holding on to, all the way up to individuals who may have received multiple advanced degrees, individuals who might have done a PhD and then subsequently went and received a medical degree, and they have carrying very large amounts of debt, and everything in between. And you can see our application and awards by gender. You'll notice that individuals, women, have applied in the amount of about 1,500, almost 1,600 applications, and that works out to about 700 awards, so roughly a 45% success rates, whereas men, about 1,200 applications and 565 awards, so roughly a 50% success rate. So the good news here is that women are represented slightly higher than men are in terms of raw application numbers. And although they have received more awards, by percent that lags behind slightly, not quite as high as the 50% success rate for men. Applications versus awards by degrees. You can see here that it's split almost 50-50 of individuals who have MDs and PhDs. A much smaller category are those individuals who have both MD and PhD degrees. And then we have a small number of individuals who hold other types of degrees, but by far the vast majority of our applicants hold either an MD or a PhD, and by the numbers, they break out to be just about a 50-50 split. So on that note, I am going to pass the baton to our next presenter, and I wish everybody luck on their LRP applications.
Hello, my name is Erica Boone. I'm the director for the Division of Loan Repayment. And the purpose of the loan repayment programs is to help keep investigators actively engaged in biomedical and biobehavioral research careers. This is a congressionally mandated program. We want to make sure that we're achieving our congressional mandate of helping to sustain the biomedical and biobehavioral research workforce. Several years ago, we engaged in an assessment of the program to kind of indicate were these programs really helping to keep investigators actively engaged? And were there any other impacts of receiving an LRP award? So what we did is that we followed LRP awardees, or rather we separated our LRP applicants into two groups. Individuals that applied for an LRP and received an LRP, that's the funded group, or individuals that applied for an LRP and did not receive that, that is the unfunded group. We followed them from the time of their application, almost 15 years out, to kind of get a gauge of their persistence in research. So really, does that mean, is a person actively still engaged in research? Are they attaining certain benchmarks and elements such as publishing, attaining other types of funding supplied by the by NIH? And what you can see and what we saw just really readily is that those individuals that applied for and received an LRP exhibited much higher levels of annual persistence in research as opposed to individuals who were unfunded. So next time your mentors ask you, why are you wasting time applying for this award that does not provide any research support for your career, you show them this, and you show them in numbers that are just stark in this way, that applying for the LRP has more to do with just paying back your student loans, that it has broad impacts on your career. There are other direct and also career and personal related benefits to receiving an LRP. First is tremendous relief from student loan debt at a very vulnerable career decision point in your life. You're at a point in your life where you're trying to really figure out, am I going to stay in this career path that I really love, or do I need to venture off? Really receiving this LRP at this point in time is really essential to helping to keep early stage investigators right on track. Next is the ability to pursue career-related passions without as much worry about salary. I hear this over and over again from LRP participants, that it allowed for them to pursue other interests, maybe an additional postdoc or so on and so forth, while they're really building the foundation for their career. So it prevents them from having to exit out and exit into other areas prematurely. It grants you protected research time. Your institution must certify that you're going to have 20 hours per week to conduct your research for the entirety of your LRP award. Protected research time can be very important for individuals who have heavy clinical or teaching responsibilities. It grants practice and preparation for applying for other NIH grant mechanisms. I'll always compare the LRP application to a grown-up F or a mini K, because the format is very similar. So once an individual goes from applying to an LRP to applying to a K, the format and the requirements are very familiar to them. It also grants that added boost to career preparedness and increased productivity across the career span. You saw that yourself. Lastly, it gives an ego boost to show an awardee that you're doing research that NIH considers to be mission critical, and you are fundable. Oftentimes, early stage investigators often hear how hard it is to remain in a biomedical and biobehavioral research career. And this is that added boost to help them to keep going, because they're showing themselves that they can do it. Now I'll hand this over to our colleague, Marilyn Sharp.
So I'm Marlene Loadsharp, part of the review branch, and I'm going to try to have you understand how the review of this LRP application is going. So first, you need in your application to say where you are now. So what you're doing now, what you did, which kind of training you had, why you are interested in health disparity and since when. You want to say who are your co-pilots, meaning your mentors, who did you have for mentors, and what type of research, why you have these mentors, and also what is your plan for the future and what is your timeline. So the major section of the application, first is the research activities. So is your personal statement. So it needs to highlight your training, your development of scientific interest and your accomplishment, and as well as your short and long-term career goals. The training career development plan we need to indicate the skills that you acquire along your path to independence. So training, professional, and leadership development opportunity that you had, grantmanship, workshop, conference attendance, and that you had and that you're going to have. And this should be included in your 2-year timeline. For the proposed research plan, the plan research activity, specific role, and your responsibility also that you will have in the next 2 years. For the research environment, so why are you where you are? Why did you choose that institution? And is the institution supporting of what you're doing? And so why is it important that you are where you are? For the new applicant, the loan information, so the lenders and service information, your loan number and total loan amount, loan status need to be well indicated also. This is not something that is shown to the reviewers, so it's not a criteria for scoring. So how the LRP application are going to be evaluated at NIMHD? So first, your application would be evaluated from the likelihood that your application, you will continue a career focus on research. So the appropriateness of the applicant's previous training and experience to prepare for a research career. This is one of the criteria. The second criteria is the appropriateness of the proposed research activity during the loan repayment award period to foster a career in research and to foster to become independent. The science of the research project is not really review. It's just, is it appropriate for health disparity or for clinical research? Depending if you have an L60, you apply for an L60 or an L32. So the science is not really reviewed. We just want to know if it's appropriate for health disparity or minority health. The commitment to the research that you have is very important. That has to be reflected in your personal statement of long-term career goal and also your plan to achieve those goals. Another critical point is the strength of your reference letters. So it call also recommendation, attesting of your potential for successful career in research. I think the minimum of letters is 3 and the maximum is 5, but these letters have to be very strong. So be careful to who you ask to send these reference letters. So to continue on the application evaluation, so the quality of the overall environment to prepare you for a career in research is also very important. So first, so the quality and appropriateness of the institutional resources and facility. You need to show that the institution can support you in your research. Also, the mentors that are going to help you in your research need to have a funding history and be productive in research. So the quality and availability of appropriate scientific mentors and colleagues is very important. Other criteria, so the assessment of the applicant development as an independent investigator. So this is very important that you show this in your plan for research for the next 2 years. And also if you if it's a resubmission, the assessment of the your research accomplishment during the previous loan repayment support period is very important, showing that you are closer to being an independent investigator. I will now pass it on the baton to Dorothy Castile, I think.
Thank you, Marlene. So what should you do to prepare? First of all, you need to make sure that you have an ERA Commons account and that it's active and the passwords are valid. You can't apply without that. It generally can take up to 6 weeks for the ID in ERA Commons to be activated. So please start early. Don't wait until the day before the application is due to start the entire application process. You will not make it. And it's very difficult to get an extension of the submission timeline. So please start early, plan early, and don't wait till the last minute. For detailed information about the application, please look at the application system instruction guidelines that are hot linked here, and that can give you some information, as well as the Division of Loan Repayment website at www.lrp.nih.gov. Remember that applicants can now choose a reviewing IC other than NIMHD to review their health disparities applications. Talk to other institutes and centers. This past year, because our applications, the health disparity applications, went to other institutes and centers, the success rate has risen. It's not where we like to see it, but it certainly has risen. So as a good business practice, understand what other agencies might be interested in buying your research, because that's what they're doing, or paying for you as a researcher to continue in research. This is the business end of an academic career. But before you submit your application, it's vital to contact a program officer to discuss your research. Now, in the case of this technical assistance webinar, we've given you a lot of information about this. You may feel like all of your questions have been answered, but in the event that you don't, please feel free to send in a question or to contact me, and I'm happy to speak with you. Please also consider speaking with institutes, the program officers at other institutes and centers. And it really makes a difference in terms of looking at not only the responsiveness or non-responsiveness of your application, which can be withdrawn, but it can also help you to have a more competitive application. Please also be aware that program officers do many things, that your specific email is not the only email they receive, and you may need to remind them that you need a response. At least that is the case with me. If I don't respond in about a week, then please, it's incumbent on you to remind them. A list of the participating institutes and centers, their mission and priority statements can be found on their own websites. and the program officer contacts can be found at this particular website, hot linked here in the application. And please remember that this year the application due date is November the 20th. It's a change from prior years, and you need to be aware of that. This is the application timeline that takes you through the entire cycle. So the application period opens on the 1st of September. This slide shows that it closes November 15th. It actually closes this year on November 20th. And at the time that the application closes, or up until the time that the application is submitted and the application period closes, you can speak to a program officer about your application. Once the application is submitted, that means that all information must go in. You must have the application, your support letters, the business officer support, and everything else that you need for the application to be submitted at the same time. The review process begins roughly in February and takes place between February and May. There is a small window for submitting additional information. Please contact a program officer before you submit any information or to change your application, as this can have fairly dramatic results for your application if it's incorrectly done. The applications are submitted to the Division of Loan Repayment, that they then go to the Center for Scientific Review for distribution to the other ICE institutes and centers throughout the NIH. Each institute and center conducts their own peer review, and then the results of that goes back to the Division of Loan Repayment for selection for pay. The Division of Loan Repayment verifies the applicant loan information, and then final decisions are made usually in August, early in August. Sometimes it's later, depending on what else is happening in that particular year. The first lender payments go out in November, and it's necessary to have quarterly verifications for future payments. Please be aware that the person who verifies your work must be at your home IC. Other mentors on your mentorship team may be at other institutes, but the person who verifies the activities that you're doing for the loan repayment program must be at your home institute. So you need to contact us, or you may contact us, some of us, at any time. You certainly can contact the Division of Loan Repayment at any time for assistance, and their help is ready on board and a great asset. And up to the date of submission, that would be November 20th for 2020. You can speak with a program officer. After that, your communication should be with the scientific review officer between November 20th and May the 1st. Again, if you're going to make any changes to your application, please speak with the program officer first. So what do you do when life happens? There are many things that can happen from the time that you submit an application to the time that it's reviewed and you hear about it. One of them is the big things that are very positive influences are publication is accepted or grant application is funded. My recommendation is that you put in your biosketch, as well as in your research activities, the fact that you have manuscripts under review and are a grant application that has been submitted and under review. Make sure that you mention that in several places, because this is an important measure of career development and career progression. If you have been accepted for funding or have the publication accepted, please contact a program officer before you contact the review officer or the Division of Loan Repayment about this, so that we can talk about the best strategy for adding or not adding this information to your review packet. If you have a change of institution, you also need to contact the program officer about this. Change of research focus, please contact a program officer. Change of mentor. Some of these things have an impact on your application review, some things don't. and a program officer can help you to determine whether this needs to go to the Division of Loan Repayment or not. Family emergencies or other life emergencies also can have an impact on your application and your eligibility and other things like that. Again, these are things, including a change of employment, that if you talk to your program officer, it's our job to help you navigate these roads. There are mechanisms for change of institution, for change of research, change of mentor, and those kinds of things requiring prior approval, and we can help you to get to the right form, the right methods for triaging that information. The Division of Loan Repayment is also a source of information about these things. However, some of these actions really need the immediate program officer approval. And so if you talk to the program officer first, that can help to save some time and energy in all of this. Here are some links to important information that might be useful to you. There are frequently asked questions both on the Division of Loan Repayment website that is hot linked here, and also for NIMHD. What does not appear here is that there are also other resources that you can use to identify what kind of research has been funded by the NIH and what institutes or centers have funded that research. You can find that on the NIH Reporter, which you can access through the Grants and Funding tab on the NIH website. It's the first button on the right-hand rail of the drop-down menu under Grants and Funding. There's also a nifty tool in NIH Reporter called Matchmaker, and that tool can be used to identify other institutes and potential program officers with whom you might want to speak about your research. Again, it's only good business practice to learn what other buyers there may be for your research, whether you're applying for the loan repayment program or for a K or an F or an R-level grant. Regardless of what you're applying for, this is a handy tool to have. These are the hot links to the notices that apply to all of the loan repayment programs and the application instructions link. And this is our contact information. Please feel free to get in touch with us. And we are now going to turn this over to questions and answers. Read out some questions that we received in advance of the webinar, and we'll start with those questions and then go on to some of the questions. You've been very active in the chat box, and both Erica and Marlene and I have been, or all of us have been, trying to respond as quickly as we could. I tried to jot down a few questions that I didn't see answers to. However, we'll do the best we can to answer as many of those questions as we can. So, Marlene, do you want to start?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I have a few questions that were sent prior to this technical orientation. So the first one is, so usually I will not stop applying, but I'm not sure that I can change my application that much more. So this is someone that applied several times, got similar feedback each time, and would like maybe to apply again, but that person wonder if it will need to apply as a new award or as a renewal application, or because they think that maybe they cannot apply as renewal application.
So I think that this is going to have to take some, Erica is going to need to weigh in as well as I will weigh in. Excuse me. The key from my perspective, and I've been doing this for about 10 years now, one key to getting funded with the loan repayment program is persistence. I have had the experience of having someone apply 7 times before they were funded the first time. And that persistence really wins out. One of the things that you can do is to talk very clearly and succinctly about how your NIH-funded career has been progressing. And that should be a part of every application that you submit, including those renewal applications. There is a time limit that for which you submit a renewal application, and then after that, you need to submit a new application. Erica, could you please, you or Andrew, remind us what the time limit is for the renewal?
I was so invested in answering in the chat. I think the question was regard to when you have to, if you're applying for another award and you're applying as a renewal, but there's been time in between your last award. If there's been more than 37 months in between the time of your previous funded application and your new application, then yes, you need to apply as a new and satisfy all of the eligibility criteria.
Thank you. And I think also one of the things that maybe didn't show up in that blurb, but was in the applicant's question, had to do with funding that the applicant received from other sources than the NIH. Please, any funding that you received since you were in kindergarten, put in your bio sketch. This shows something about your career development, especially if you've received that now. So if you receive funding from the National Science Foundation or from HRSA or SAMHSA or wherever you receive funding, including Robert Wood Johnson or any other foundation funding, and that funding is supporting your research, those are pieces of evidence of your productivity as a scholar, and that must be included in your application. So since kindergarten is a bit of an exaggeration, I know, but what I'm trying to say is that you need to show that you're productive. And grant applications, whether or not they are funded, is a sign of productivity. In your bio sketch, however, with regard to publications, just to repeat, and it was also put in the chat, for those things that you have submitted, please clearly label the status of that publication under submitted, revise and resubmit, pre-publication online, before print, or whatever it is. Label clearly those publications. Publications and grant proposals are the sign of productivity and absolutely imperative in your application. Marlene?
Oh, okay. So, second question. Say, I will have an independent one-year grant from HRSA for next year. But it's still be but that person will still be on a K, and would it be enough to put that person over the mark?
For an independent to be, unless you receive funding that's multi-year, I would say, and Erica can correct me if I'm incorrect, but you need to receive a minimum of $100,000 a year for more than 1 year to be considered an independent investigator. And if you are on a K award, most K awards are mentored awards. Those are not independent awards. The metric for independence is an R01, not even an R03 or an R21. So it's an R01 or a U19 or a U01, but not a K award, not an F or a T, an R level grant. Erica, did you have anything to add to that or to change on that?
Nope, not at all. But I hope that we're going to address that question from Brian Frank about the HRSA and National Health Service Corps Loan Repayment Program.
So you cannot concurrently receive two different loan repayment awards.
There's a service obligation associated with both of those, and you can't satisfy those both at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you. So between us, we got it. Next question.
Okay. Is there a time limit on this from last period of clinical training? Is there a time limit for this, I suppose, from the last period of clinical training?
As far as I know, throughout your career, and there's been some questions in the chat about, does rank matter? How long have you been in the business? Does that matter? it doesn't matter. You're eligible to apply as long as you have a doctoral degree for the L32 and the L60. And it doesn't matter what step you are in your career. And there is no limitation either for eligibility in terms of distance from the end of your training. That is not one of the eligibility criteria. So, you know, you're eligible throughout as long as you're living and working and doing research, you're eligible as far as I know. Erica, that's good for you, right? You're going to interrupt
Good for me.
if I'm wrong. Okay, good. Thanks.
And next question is, would you suggest considering an application to your program at NIMHD given my research area, K00, will be funded by NCI?
It does not matter who funds your research. That's not one of the review criteria, and that's not one of the funding decision criteria that we use for making selections. However, you may want to consider this. The National Cancer Institute is the largest, best funded institute at the NIH of the 27 institutes and centers here. NIMHD is the third smallest, with the third smallest budget at the NIH. You may want to at least speak with an NCI LRP program officer to see if your research would fare better there, because they have more money that they can put on into the LRP than NIMHD can. And let me just give you a little bit of historical information. The Loan Repayment Program was part of the legislation that established the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities. And so from early on, NIMHD put a considerable amount of money in the Loan Repayment Program. In recent years, and in fact, we have funded on an annual basis historically as much as NCI has funded, and sometimes more in terms of loan repayment applications. However, in the last several years, there's been a change of philosophy. And the philosophy is at NIMHD, the philosophy is that all institutes across the NIH should be supporting health disparities research because we legally are mandated to do so. And secondly, all institutes across the NIH should be supporting the loan repayment program. And so that's one of the really great things about this change that Erica spoke about earlier, and that I've also spoken about earlier. So if you look historically, NIMHD has really funded a lion's share, and we continue to receive most of the applications for the health disparities and all of the applications for the clinical disadvantaged background mechanisms. For the health disparities, you definitely should consider speaking with other institute program officers and then tailor your research questions, your scientific questions, to fit the mission of that institute. That's only good business practice if that seems to be the most comfortable fit for you and for your research. That decision ultimately is yours.
May I comment?
Yeah.
Always tell people that you owe it to yourself to do your homework and to figure out which institutes, not just for the LRP, but be thinking beyond the LRP. Think about your research in a more broad way. Try to figure it out by talking to other program officers how your research may play under the research and funding priorities of other institutes and centers. Research priorities and funding priorities can be similar, but they can absolutely be different. So you must talk to program officers to get a gauge to see where you should be going to supply the funding for your research. It is imperative that you look at other ICs. I talk to people all the time, especially at APHA. There are 25,000 people. Each one of them say, oh, I'm a health disparities researcher. No, you're a researcher with health disparities interests. And you need to be thinking about your interests in a very, very broad way. Now, of course, I'm on the NIMHD technical assistance webinar, and they're like, no, we want people who are health disparities researchers. But you really do owe it to yourself to see who out there is going to be a funder for your research. Also, please, if you have not gone to the Matchmaker tool, do yourself a favor. Put in your abstract for your own work. See who else out there is funding the kind of work that you're interested in doing right now and going into the future. Do yourself that favor and do that homework. When I was a program officer at NIDA, every year NCATS would come in and they would fund people that we didn't fund via our first round of funding. I go to our to our budget officers, beg for more money, and look for other people that I could fund via the LRPs. And NCATS had scooped them right on up. Most of those individuals that were funded by NCATS didn't even have any idea of who they were, had no idea that another institute and center shared their interest in their research and would be willing to fund that. Please, please, please do yourself that favor and see who else is out there. I always say, I compare this to like making sure you take your baby to the right daycare, right? So you spend this time growing this baby inside of you, eating nutritious food, not cursing people out, maintaining your stress levels, picking the hospital, the doctor, the music, the birthing rooms, all those kinds of things like that. And then you take that baby and you sit it out on the curb and hope that a nice family comes and picks it up. You would not do that with your own human baby. Don't do that with your research goals. Don't do that with your research dreams. Make sure you're doing your homework so that you find the best place so you can figure out where your work will be nurtured, grown, and funded.
Thank you. We don't disagree at all. So, Arlene?
Yes. So the next question. I'm currently leading an RWGF-funded study, which is looking at how managed care organizations are addressing social determinants of health. For my LRP project, I want to expand on this to examine that of rural hospitals, especially in this time of COVID-19. So what are your thoughts on my proposed work, and what are your some suggestions to make it better fit for your institute?
One of the things that I would suggest is that when you write your application, you focus on the same kind of criteria that you find in being called for in the R01 application. That is, that you look at what is the scientific question that you're asking, and how are your aims structured to provide different pieces of the answer to that question. Because what you're being reviewed for actually is your potential to have an NIH-funded career. And so using that format provides the reviewers with extra evidence about that, about your knowledge and understanding of the NIH pathway and what the requirements are. Vis-a-vis healthcare system focused projects, NIMHD does fund that. But you also need to document that there is a measurable disparity in a measurable health outcome, and that's what you're focused on. That needs to be part of your scientific question, both the justification that there's a disparity, or the documentation that there's a disparity, and then how you're going to be addressing the reduction or elimination of that disparity through the research that you're doing. In that way, some people have talked about K awards and other things. If you already have a K award, or if you're applying for a K, the research that you're proposing, it's not a double dipping in this case. You can have a funded R-level grant, or a K, or an F, or a T, and the research questions can be the same because the research is funded elsewhere. It's scientifically reviewed elsewhere. You are being reviewed in this application, which is a contract, not a grant. You are being reviewed for your potential to be an NIH-funded researcher. The funds that is provided through this contract go directly to the bank, and they do not pass go in your pocket at all. They go directly to the bank to pay your loan, to relieve anxiety and stress for you so that you can pursue an NIH-funded career. So I think what you need to do is to make sure that you look at the NIH mission, the NIMHD mission rather, and I gave you some links to that. We have an AJPH special issue on the NIMHD mission and scientific visioning, and have a look at the research framework, and also in your career development plan. As a mentored applicant, you may want to consider turning in an application to our very competitive but worthwhile Health Disparities Research Institute. Marlene?
Next question. As financial toxicity represents somewhat of a focus area, I wanted to reach out and see if this will align with your current institutional priorities, or if it should consider, or if I should consider applying to a different center.
Well, I'm going to give an answer to this, and then I'm going to refer to Erica. It is not clear to me what the health outcome is for financial toxicity in the description that you gave. It doesn't mean that it isn't there, but you didn't provide that information, and reviewers will only review what is concretely expressed and written in your application. So if that were to constitute the entirety of your application, I would have to say that it was A, not responsive, and B, not competitive, and you wouldn't get a very good score. So in talking about financial toxicity, you need to really make clear and connect the dots between that and a measurable health outcome in a health disparity population that's defined by law. Erica, did you have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay. I mean, it's not clear to me that that applies to health. So, Marlene?
Okay. How can I relay my commitment to my research in a way that is extremely compelling? And can I compose a research plan that is truly innovative to reviewers?
So one thing that we may not have talked enough about is working with mentors. And for me, and again, Erica may have something different to say to you, but to me, a mentor is insufficient. You need a mentorship team, and team usually comprises more than 2 people. Your mentors don't have to all be at your institute, but the questions that you ask are really your problems to solve. As a researcher and an active researcher, this needs to build, your answer would actually build on the work that you've done and the research findings that you've already have with respect to a specific scientific question. And it's up to you, it's incumbent on you to understand where the gaps in the literature and the gaps in our scientific knowledge are with respect to your scientific question, and for you to propose an innovative way to approach solving that question, the questions that you've posed in terms of the science of health disparities. So for us, we're trying to understand the mechanisms that produce health disparities and what we can do to reduce or eliminate health disparities. And that can be, the disease outcome we're agnostic. The stage of life, the body system, we're agnostic. But what is important are the processes of health that produce health disparities in our populations. So those are challenges that you as a researcher need to meet. It's not something that we as program officers can help you solve. We can tell you if you're on target, we can tell you if you meet the mission of our institute, but we can't write your application for you. A number of people have written asking if I could review or we could review specific aims pages or application parts and things like that. And this is not something that I'm able to do or any of us are able to do with this particular mechanism. And NIMHD usually receives more than 300 applications every year for the loan repayment program. And this is not the only thing in any of our portfolios, except for Erica's. It's the only thing in hers, but I don't think she answers this level of question. So I would say you need to work with your mentorship team to shape your application. And I think somebody is not on mute.
Sorry, it's me waiting my turn.
Okay. Did you have a concept? I mean,
I do. And that's a good question, right? And everybody wants to know that secret sauce, right? So my thing is that if you think that you're not clear in your application, and the whining, that's not me. That's Brownie. He probably sees a squirrel or something. Brownie, cut it out, dude. So the thing is that you should probably talk about the significance and the innovation and the relevance of your work in your application several times. So you're going to make sure that the reviewer does not miss any of that. You also want to make sure that your letters of recommendation are really kind of focused on your commitment to your research, right? So the person that is writing that letter of recommendation should be addressing what you are committing or what you are committing to the building of your research field. How is your work relevant to the continuation of the research field? How are you building on that? Why is your work innovative? You ask the question on how do I show innovation? You tell them how it's innovative. Your recommenders, especially your mentor, or your mentoring team, is also going to tell them how the work that you are doing is innovative. Now, should you be describing research aims that aren't currently funded? Not with regards to the LRP, because if that work is not funded, how can you do the work and how can we pay you, right? So if you wanted to talk about work that you're proposing in the future, talk about in your future research plans, talk about the innovation of that work, talk yourself up, be kind to yourself, with the description of your accomplishments, how you developed your research interests, where you're going to be going in eventually as an independent researcher. Also in your application, please say that you want to be an independent researcher when you grow up. Okay, I promise if you don't say that, then a reviewer is going to say, "Oh, I don't know what they want to do," with their work. Make sure you state it. Don't leave any gaps. Don't leave any holes, because usually when you leave a hole or you leave a gap, someone doesn't know what you want to do eventually, they're going to fill that in, and they're not going to fill that in with something positive. And then they're going to go back and look at the rest of your application and try to figure out, where are those other holes? What do they mean by that, right? So make sure you're painting a cohesive picture with your application. Talk about your mentoring and your training plan is very, very important for filling holes as well. What are the activities? What are the things that you're going to be engaged in to help you develop as an independent researcher? If you're not real clear, talk to your mentor. If you're still not really clear, talk to an LRP ambassador, talk to your peers, because peer mentoring is almost just as important as mentoring with your mentor, and it might be even more important in some instances. Okay, talk to each other. You guys have got all of these people on this chat line who's either have gotten LRPs before and they're trying to go back for the renewals, or they haven't been successful yet. You guys need to talk to each other and see how you both can help support each other. That's it.
So next question, will my future employer be my primary mentor as she will be my mentor during the award, or should I use my current mentor and switch later?
You can switch later if you need to, if you switch institutions or do a change of institution, but your current mentor is certainly fine. One of the issues that you will need to address is how your career will develop and build on and separate from your current mentor, because what reviewers are looking for is how you're going to take this off into an innovative new direction that's appropriate for you and that helps you to develop your career. You don't want to have your mentor's career, you want to have your own career. So that's a necessary thing. Again, please let me emphasize that team means more than two, and that there are various aspects of your career that will need different people to be supportive of them. For NIMHD, while this is not a requirement, it's highly recommended that you have at least one of your mentors be able to mentor you in health disparities research. That is, that they have a history of conducting health disparities research, and that at least one of your mentors have a history, not just an R21, but a history of NIH funding. It's also highly advisable that your mentors be ahead of you in the career development pipeline. If you are an assistant professor and your mentorship team is all at the same professorial level as assistant professors, they will have a hard time mentoring you on a pathway that they have not yet trod themselves. You need more senior people who are more senior than you and who have expertise and a reputation and documentation of successful mentorship of others in career development. Arlene?
Okay. Do I have to, so this is a question that was already on the chat, but always interesting to say again. Do I have to propose a specific project on minority or health disparity in the LRP application through the clinical research for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds program?
For the L32 or clinical research from disadvantaged backgrounds, you do not have to pose health disparities research, but you do have to pose clinical research. Now, someone has also asked a question, and I'm not sure that it's come up here in the chat, about whether or not animal model research is included in either the health disparities or the clinical research from disadvantaged backgrounds. Clinical research must adhere to the NIH definition of clinical research. That is, the data must be collected by you or a close collaborator with human populations. And the setting does not have to be in a clinic. It can be in a number of different, it can be any place, but it does have to be human subjects research. For NIMHD, for clinical, for disadvantaged backgrounds research, vis-a-vis the animal models question, we fund extremely little research on using animal models. Other institutes fund animal model research, and I would recommend that you talk to those other program officers. However, health disparities research, regardless of where it applies, must be relevant to the legally defined health disparity populations in the United States. And there are very few animal model researches that emulate the impact of health disparities on measurable health outcomes.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
If
Please.
you're conducting pediatric relevant research, then you can apply if you're utilizing animal models, just because it's not ethical to conduct certain types of experiments on humans, in particular for those who might be considered to be adolescent or pediatric models. For example, I always say that I'm a recovering substance abuse and addiction researcher. So, nobody wants you to inject their kids with Coke. So animal models would be completely relevant for that. However, if you're thinking about the adult space, then no, utilization of animal models is not eligible under the clinical research LRP. You have to have something from a person, whether that is blood, bone, saliva, urine, brain, cognitive phenomena, so survey research, etc. If you have any more questions with regards to that, then I've put my email address in the chat feature. Reach out to me, reach out to Dr. Castile, Dr. Sharp, anyone else who's on the line.
Okay. Next question. I received an Health Disparity LRP award from NIMHD in 2018, and I'm applying for renewal this fall. I wanted to inquire about whether I should be applying as a mentored or independent investigator.
Again, you should apply as a mentored award, regardless of your faculty level, regardless of anything else, unless you have received at a minimum of $100,000 per year for more than 1 year in extramural competitive funding. The source can be whatever, but you have to be bringing in at least $100,000. It doesn't have to be NIH funding. You're simply not not independent if you're not bringing in that much. You have to be able to support yourself and other people on your, plus your research on your grant. There is no, we don't look at least for NIMHD, I can't account for other ICs across the NIH, but we don't look at mentored or independent as one of the funding selection criteria. What we do look at is your productivity in terms of publications and the scientific focus of your work. So look at the mission and scientific vision of our institute.
Okay, good. Next question. I qualify as a researcher from a disadvantaged background. Is there a way to apply for both opportunities, health disparity and disadvantaged background, within the same application cycle?
The answer is no. You pick one. Pick a winner. There's less competition for the L32, and it may give you more room. I'm aware that we have 1 minute left and we haven't gotten to all the questions. There are a couple of questions I would like to I'd like to just look at the chat box and answer right now. If you are on a pilot study on a P30, that does not, the overall parent is extramural funding. You are not the PI on that grant. You may be a PI on the pilot, but the PI of the overall grant is the PI of the parent grant. That does not constitute more than $100,000 worth of funding. There was another question about, can you be funded both on a K and an LRP? Yes, you can. If you have questions about loan eligibility, contact the Division of Loan Repayment. If you are a project leader as part of a COBRA, is it considered a mentored award? Yes, unless you are the PI on the parent grant, you are not independent on that. If you have a teaching load issue, you must spend, as Erica said, and as we've said, you have to have at least 20 hours per week, 50% time allocated to research. If you're on a K, that should guarantee you the time that you need for research. And your institute must give you release time for both the K and the LRP, actually. I know that there are more questions. Any last words from Erica, Marlene, from Andrew, anybody?
No, there are more questions, but if you think there is no time.
We've run out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time, and we all would like to thank you for joining us. This webinar will be preserved and archived on the NIMHD website, and I will copy the chat, and we will definitely prepare this as part of the frequently asked questions that will be posted on the NIMHD LRP website. Thank you, and good luck, everybody. We're looking forward to receiving your applications.
Yes, good luck.
We'll be looking for your applications.
Bye now.